They say money can't buy happiness. But for Chloe Vance, it was the only currency that mattered. She had her sights set on the ultimate prize, a New York City CEO, a penthouse, and a life dripping in diamonds. She played her part perfectly, the irresistible siren luring Julian Croft away from his pregnant wife. Chloe thought she was writing her own fairy tale, securing her future, one secret rendezvous at a time. She never imagined that every whispered promise, every stolen kiss, and every expensive gift was just a scene in a much larger play. A play written, directed, and starring the one woman she dismissed as a casualty, the wife. And the final act was about to bring her world crashing down in the most public, most humiliating way imaginable. The view from the 80th floor penthouse was an ocean of glittering lights. Manhattan stretched below a concrete and glass kingdom, and from this vantage point, Catherine Sterling Croft was its queen. Her hand rested gently on the subtle swell of her stomach, a protective gesture that had become second nature over the past 5 months. The baby there first was a secret joy. She and her husband, Julian Croft, had nurtured a final perfect piece to complete the portrait of their enviable lives. Julian was the charismatic founder and CEO of Croft Innovations, a tech behemoth that had disrupted the logistics industry. He was the new money wunderkind, celebrated on magazine covers for his sharp mind and even sharper suits. Catherine, by contrast, was old money Grace. The Sterlings were a name synonymous with New York philanthropy and quiet, unshakable influence. Their union had been the talk of the society pages, a merger of dynamic innovation and established prestige. From the outside, it was perfect. The sprawling apartment with its curated art, the weekend trips to their estate in the Hamptons, the effortless access to a world of impossible reservations and exclusive events. Julian was attentive often, bringing home ridiculously expensive floral arrangements for no reason, or whispering how her pregnancy had only made her more beautiful. But lately the perfection had begun to feel brittle, like a flawless porcelain vase with a hairline crack invisible to the casual observer, but threatening to shatter with the slightest tremor. It started with the phone. Julian had always been attached to it, a necessary evil of his trade. But now it was an extension of his hand, angled away from her with a new subtle secrecy. Late-night strategy sessions became more frequent. Business trips to London or Tokyo were extended by a day, then 2, with rushed, staticky apologies. "Another late one, darling?" Catherine asked one Tuesday evening, her voice carefully neutral. She was arranging white peonies in a crystal vase on the marble island in their kitchen. The scent filled the sterile air, a fragrant mask for the anxiety coiling in her gut. Julian loosened his tie, dropping his briefcase by the door with a heavy thud. "You wouldn't believe it. The board is breathing down my neck about the Q3 projections. We're on the verge of a massive breakthrough, but the pressure is immense." He walked over, kissing the top of her head. His cologne, a custom blend from a perfumer in Paris, smelled faintly of sandalwood and something else, a cloying sweetness that wasn't hers, a floral note, something cheap. She forced a smile. "Well, you need to take care of yourself. And us." She patted her stomach meaningfully. His eyes softened, the guilt flickering so quickly. She might have missed it if she weren't looking for it. "Of course. You two are my world. Everything I do is for you." But the words felt rehearsed, a script he was reciting to convince himself as much as her. A week later, the first real tremor struck. Catherine was organizing their monthly receipts for their business manager, a tedious task she nonetheless performed with meticulous care. Tucked between a charge for $1,000 dinner at Per Se and a payment to Julian's tailor was a receipt from Cartier. It was for a Trinity bracelet, the interwoven bands of rose yellow and white gold. A classic. It was dated 3 weeks prior. Her heart did a slow, painful lurch. It wasn't her birthday. It wasn't their anniversary. She had certainly never received it. She called her best friend, Olivia Brent, a sharp-witted art gallery owner who had been her confidant since their days at boarding school. "Tell me I'm being a crazy, hormonal, pregnant woman," Catherine said, her voice tight after explaining the receipt. "You're pregnant, yes. Hormonal, probably. But crazy." "Not a chance," Olivia stated flatly. "Catherine, you have the best intuition of anyone I know. If you feel like something is wrong, something is wrong. Men like Julian, they live in a world of temptation. They think their success makes them invincible." "But he loves me, Liv. I know he does." "I'm sure he does," Olivia conceded gently. "But powerful men can be monumentally stupid. They compartmentalize. They think they can have the perfect wife and the bit on the side and keep the two worlds from ever colliding. What are you going to do?" Catherine looked around the silent, opulent apartment. The city lights outside seemed to mock her. "I don't know yet. I need more than a receipt. I need proof. If I accuse him and I'm wrong, I'll destroy what we have based on a feeling." "And if you're right, he's already destroying it," Olivia countered. "Be careful, Cat. Don't show your hand until you have a royal flush." The conversation solidified a cold resolve in her heart. The hurt was a deep physical ache, but beneath it the sterling steel was beginning to harden. She had not been raised to be a victim. She was a strategist, just like her father, a man who had dominated Wall Street for 40 years. She hired a private investigator, a discreet, expensive firm, recommended by her family's lawyer. She hated herself for it. It felt like a betrayal in itself, a clandestine act that sullied their marriage. But the Cartier receipt was a splinter in her mind, and she had to get it out. 2 weeks later, a plain manila envelope arrived via courier. Catherine waited until Julian had left for a weekend retreat with the board in Aspen. Her hands trembled as she sat at her rosewood desk, the city skyline, a grey, unforgiving backdrop. Inside were photographs, grainy, long-lens shots but unmistakable. Julian. He was laughing, his arm draped possessively around a young woman with fierce ambition in her eyes and a mane of artificially blonde hair. They were stepping out of a boutique hotel in Soho. In another photo, they were dining at a dimly lit table, their heads close together. In the final damning shot, the woman was lifting her wrist to admire her new piece of jewelry. The Cartier Trinity bracelet. The air left Catherine's lungs in a silent scream. The vase didn't just have a crack. It had been shattered into 1,000,000 pieces at her feet. The pain was blinding, a white-hot agony that consumed her. It wasn't just the betrayal of his body, but the casual cruelty of it. The lies whispered in their bed, the stolen moments, the gift, a symbol of trinity, of interconnectedness, given to another woman, while his wife carried their child. She wept. For hours, she let the grief wash over her, a storm of tears for the man she thought she knew and the life she believed they were building. She cried for her unborn child, who would be born into a fractured home. But as the sun began to set, casting long, mournful shadows across the room, the tears subsided. The storm passed, and in its wake there was a chilling, profound calm. The hurt was still there, a cold, heavy stone in her chest, but it was no longer her master. It was fuel. Olivia was wrong. A royal flush wasn't enough. Confronting him would lead to tearful apologies, empty promises, a messy divorce where lawyers would pick over the bones of their life. Chloe, the woman in the photos, would likely get a settlement and fade away, a minor footnote in their drama. Julian might even eventually be forgiven. No. That was not justice. That was not a solution. It was a concession. A simple divorce was a release. What Julian and that woman deserved was a lesson, a reckoning, a meticulously crafted, perfectly executed ruin that would not only end their affair, but would dismantle the very foundation of the mistress's ambition and force Julian to confront the chasm of his own weakness. She picked up her phone, her hand steady now. She didn't call a lawyer. She called the one person in the world she knew would understand the need for something more than just revenge. The one person who would relish the game. Her brother, Marcus Sterling. "Marcus," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "I need your help. It's about Julian, and I have a plan." Chloe Vance believed in manifestation. Not the gentle yoga and incense kind, but a ruthless, focused targeting of desire. And her desire had a name, the 1%. From her cramped studio apartment in Bushwick, a stark contrast to the world she craved, she would scroll through Instagram and Forbes, studying the habitats and habits of the ultra-rich. She saw herself not as an outsider looking in, but as a predator studying her prey. Her friend Zara, who worked as a bottle service girl in a meat-packing district club, was her co-conspirator and enabler. "Look, Chloe," Zara had said, perched on the edge of Chloe's bed and filing her acrylic nails. "You're gorgeous, you're smart, and you're hungry. Don't waste that on some broke artist who thinks sharing an Uber is splurging. You're built for better things. You just need the right launch pad." Chloe couldn't agree more. She'd worked for 2 years as a junior marketing associate at a stodgy second-tier tech firm, watching men with half her wit and a tenth of her drive get promoted because they'd gone to the right schools or played golf with the right people. She saw the system was rigged, so she'd decided to rig it back in her favor. Marriage, she concluded, was the fastest, most effective merger and acquisition a woman like her could execute. Julian Croft became her target by design. She'd read a feature on him in Wired magazine detailing his meteoric rise. He was brilliant, driven, and most importantly married to a woman who seemed, in Chloe's estimation, to be a boring, old-money placeholder. Catherine Sterling Croft was beautiful in a classical, understated way, but she lacked the fire, the edge that Chloe cultivated. She was a museum piece. Chloe was a living flame. Chloe engineered their first meeting with the precision of a military campaign. She learned from a disgruntled ex-employee on LinkedIn that Julian often went for a solitary drink at the Aviary, a high-end cocktail bar in Columbus Circle, to decompress after a tough week. She chose her armor carefully, a silk slip dress that was just a little too daring for the venue heels that made her legs look endless, and a perfume, a heady, almost aggressive gardenia scent that was impossible to ignore. She sat at the bar, nursing a single expensive cocktail, and waited. When Julian walked in, looking weary and powerful, she accidentally caught his eye and gave him a small conspiratorial smile. As he sat a few stools down, she pretended to be engrossed in a book, ironically, a biography of Napoleon. It took him less than 10 minutes. "That looks like heavy reading for a Friday night," he said, his voice as smooth as the aged whiskey the bartender was pouring for him. Chloe looked up, feigning surprise. I find it's best to learn from those who knew how to conquer the world. She closed the book, her fingers tracing the title. Chloe Vance, she said, extending a hand. Her nails were immaculate, painted a deep predatory red. Julian Croft. I know, she said with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Everyone in the tech world knows who you are. The hook was in. He was flattered. Over the next hour, she played him like a virtuoso. She was impressed by his work, but not starstruck. She challenged his opinions on market trends, showing she was more than just a pretty face. She listened intently, her gaze never wavering, making him feel like the only man in the universe. She was a perfect cocktail of intellect, beauty, and unabashed admiration. She never mentioned his wife. When he glanced at his wedding ring, a solid platinum band, she simply let her eyes follow his. A flicker of something disappointment, understanding passing through them before she smiled and changed the subject. She was planting a seed she doesn't judge, she understands. He walked her to the curb to get a taxi. I shouldn't, he said, the internal conflict clear on his face. But I'd love to continue this conversation. I'm not a home wrecker, Julian, she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. Her touch was electric. But I'm also not blind. I see a man who isn't being celebrated. If you ever want to talk to someone who gets it, you have my number. She had already written it on a napkin and slipped it into his suit pocket when he wasn't looking. It was a bold, presumptive move, and it paid off. He texted her the next day. Their affair escalated quickly from discreet lunches in out-of-the-way bistros to afternoons in the sterile luxury of a suite at the Greenwich Hotel. Chloe was everything Catherine wasn't. Where Catherine was calm, Chloe was fiery. Where Catherine's world was one of quiet legacy, Chloe's was one of fierce, palpable ambition. She made Julian feel like a king, a conqueror, not just a husband. She doesn't understand the pressure you're under, Chloe would murmur, tracing the lines of his jaw as they lay in the post-coital tangle of hotel sheets. Her money was inherited. Yours is earned. It's different. It's real. She was an expert at identifying his insecurities and soothing them. She praised his riskiest business decisions, validated his frustrations with his board of directors, and made him feel seen in a way he hadn't in years. She was the ultimate cheerleader for the cult of Julian Croft, and he in turn showered her with gifts. It started small, a bouquet of exotic orchids delivered to her apartment, a first-edition book she'd mentioned. Then it escalated. A shopping spree on Fifth Avenue, a weekend in Miami on a business trip, and then the Cartier bracelet. He presented it to her in their hotel room. The famous red box sat on the pillow. Chloe's heart hammered in her chest. This was it. This was the moment a man transitions a woman from a dalliance to an investment. Julian, it's beautiful. She breathed her performance of awe-struck gratitude. Pitch perfect. She allowed a single tear to trace a path down her cheek. But you shouldn't have. I wanted it to, he said, his voice thick with a mixture of desire and guilt. You deserve beautiful things. As he fastened the cool gold around her wrist, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. The bracelet was a shackle of a different kind, one of victory. She had him. The CEO was hers. She thought of his pregnant wife somewhere in their palatial penthouse, probably arranging flowers or planning a nursery, blissfully unaware. Chloe felt a flash of pity, quickly replaced by a surge of triumph. The woman hadn't fought for her man. She had grown complacent, secure in her position, and had left the door wide open for someone like Chloe to walk right in. What are you thinking about? Julian asked, kissing her shoulder. Chloe met his eyes in the mirror, her expression a carefully constructed mask of adoration. "I'm thinking," she said, her voice a seductive whisper, "that I'm the luckiest woman in the world." She was playing the long game. The bracelet was a down payment. The end goal was the full buyout. His name, his fortune, his life. The pregnant wife was a temporary obstacle, one that Chloe was confident would soon be removed. She had studied her target, laid her trap, and secured her prize. She was the serpent in their Eden, and she had just convinced Adam to take the first bite. She was so focused on the apple, she never once thought to look up and see God watching. The days following the arrival of the investigator's report were a masterclass in composure for Catherine. On the surface, nothing changed. She continued her work with the Sterling Family Foundation, attended her prenatal yoga classes, and discussed nursery color palettes with an interior designer. She greeted Julian with a serene smile when he returned from his board retreat, a weekend he'd spent with Chloe in a luxury ski lodge, according to the PI's follow-up email. She listened to his stories of high-altitude negotiations, her heart a frozen stone in her chest. Each lie he told was another brick in the wall she was building around it. Her grief, once a raging inferno, had been banked and forged into something cold, sharp, and patient. This was no longer about a broken heart. It was about protecting her legacy and her child's future from the collateral damage of Julian's weakness and his mistress's greed. Her brother Marcus Sterling arrived at the penthouse 2 days after her call. He was Catherine's opposite in many ways. While she was composed and classical, Marcus was a whirlwind of creative energy and roguish charm. He'd flirted with acting in his 20s, much to their father's chagrin, before finding his niche in venture capitalism, backing boutique hotels and eccentric art projects. He had a chameleon's ability to adapt to any situation and an actor's love for a dramatic role. Most importantly, he was fiercely loyal to his sister. He found her in the library, the damning photos spread across the antique desk. He looked at them, his jaw tightening, then at his sister's pale, determined face. "I could have him ruined on Wall Street by morning," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. A few calls, a few whispered rumors about instability at Croft Innovations. His stock would plummet. Catherine shook her head, pushing the photos into a neat pile. "No, that hurts me. It hurts the baby. And it's too simple. Julian's crime isn't just infidelity, it's arrogance. He thinks he's untouchable. And this woman..." She gestured to the image of Chloe laughing and radiant with Julian's stolen affection. "Her crime is ambition. She doesn't want Julian. She wants what he represents. A key to a kingdom she feels entitled to." So we don't destroy the kingdom," Catherine said, her eyes gleaming with a cold, intelligent light. "We present her with a bigger one. We make her believe she's trading up. We make her discard Julian like he's last season's handbag." Marcus leaned back, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across his face. He recognized the look in his sister's eyes. It was the same look their father got before a hostile takeover. "Oh, this is much better than my idea. You want to humiliate them both. You want to make him feel the sting of being tossed aside for a better offer. And you want to strip her of everything when she reaches for it. This is diabolical. I love it. Tell me the plan." For the next 4 hours they plotted. It was a creative, exhilarating process, a dark storm of ingenuity that pushed Catherine's pain into the background. They were no longer the victim and the avenger. They were architects. The cornerstone of their plan was a new character, Sebastian Thorne. "He needs to be everything Julian is, but more," Catherine dictated, pacing back and forth. If Julian is a millionaire, Sebastian is a billionaire. If Julian has a penthouse, Sebastian has a private island. If Julian flies first class, Sebastian owns the jet. Marcus, a natural performer, was already getting into character. "He's not American," he declared. "Too easy to check. He's European, old family, but he made his own fortune. Media shy, a recluse. No social media footprint to speak of, which makes him mysterious and impossible to Google stalk effectively." They built Sebastian Thorn from the ground up. He was the heir to a defunct German industrial fortune who had brilliantly reinvested in rare earth minerals and private space exploration. His company, Thorn Global, was based in Zurich, with satellite offices in Hong Kong and London. He was in New York for a few months to quietly explore new investment opportunities. "We need to create a legend," Marcus said, scribbling notes on a legal pad. "He needs to be seen in the right places, but only briefly. A flash of impossible wealth." They began to choreograph the operation. Phase 1. The sighting. Marcus as Sebastian would start appearing at the periphery of the high-end world. He'd attend a Christie's auction and outbid a known hedge fund manager for a piece of modern art. He'd be seen dining at Daniel, but in the private skybox, a privilege reserved for a select few. He wouldn't interact. He would only be observed. Whispers would start. Who is that man? Phase 2, the lure. They needed to get Sebastian and Chloe in the same room. Olivia Catherine's art gallery owner-friend was brought into the circle of trust. Her upcoming gallery opening, showcasing a trendy new photographer, was the perfect venue. Chloe, eager to be seen as a patron of the arts and to elevate her social standing, would undoubtedly be there on Julian's arm. That's where Sebastian will make his first move, Catherine planned. Subtle. He'll admire the same piece of art she's looking at. He'll make a quiet, insightful comment. He won't try to pick her up. He'll just plant a seed of intrigue. Phase 3. The escalation. This was the core of the honey trap. Sebastian would orchestrate a series of chance encounters. He would overwhelm Chloe not with crude displays of cash, but with a level of sophistication and access that would make Julian's world seem provincial. He wouldn't just send flowers. He'd send a rare orchid that was flown in that morning from Costa Rica with a simple handwritten note in German. He wouldn't offer a shopping spree. He'd mention he was flying to Milan for a suit fitting and casually ask if she'd like to join him. "We need to make Julian look like the minor leagues." Marcus grinned, the thrill of the performance dancing in his eyes. "We need her to see Julian as a stepping stone she's outgrown." Phase 4. The trap. The final act would take place at the Sterling Family Foundation's annual charity gala. It was the pinnacle of the New York social calendar, an event Chloe would be desperate to attend as a sign of her arrival. By then, Catherine calculated Chloe would have left Julian and would be expecting to make her grand debut on the arm of the elusive billionaire Sebastian Thorn. That's where the curtain would fall. To make Sebastian Thorn real, they spared no expense. Marcus was given a new wardrobe of bespoke suits, a Patek Philippe watch from the family vault, and a black Amex card with no conceivable limit. They rented a black Maybach with a driver. They even had their tech team create a shell website for Thorn Global, a single elegant landing page with a login portal and the words discretion, vision, power. As they finalized the details, Marcus looked at his sister with a newfound respect. The fragile, heartbroken woman was gone. In her place was a general commanding an army. "Are you sure about this cat?" he asked quietly, the game momentarily forgotten. "Once this starts, there's no going back. For you and Julian either." Catherine looked out at the city lights, her reflection, a pale ghost in the glass. Her hand went to her belly. Julian and I, as we were. That ended the moment he gave another woman that bracelet. I'm not destroying my marriage, Marcus. I'm discovering what's left of it, and I'm protecting my child's birthright from a predator. This isn't just revenge on her. It's a test for him. Let's see how he reacts when the worm turns. Let's see what he's made of when he's the one who gets thrown away. Her voice was as cut and clear as ice. The plan was in motion. The architect had drawn the blueprints. Now it was time to start building the trap. The trap was baited at Olivia Brent's gallery, opening in Chelsea. The cavernous, white space buzzed with the city's self-appointed cultural elite. Champagne flowed and the air crackled with networking and air kisses. Chloe arrived, clinging to Julian's arm like a trophy. She was wearing a crimson dress that was a shade too loud for the minimalist art on the walls, a deliberate choice to ensure she stood out. She surveyed the room with the keen eye of a hawk cataloguing the influential faces, desperate to be seen to be included. Julian looked distracted. A man pulled in two directions. He introduced Chloe to a few acquaintances, with a forced casualness that didn't go unnoticed, referring to her as a marketing consultant. The lie hung awkwardly in the air. Catherine had prepared Marcus meticulously. Don't approach her directly, she'd instructed. Let her see you. Let her feel your presence before you ever say a word. Marcus, in his persona as Sebastian Thorne, was a masterpiece of understated power. He wore a dark, tailored suit with no tie, a look of effortless European elegance. He didn't mingle. He stood alone near a large, dramatic photograph of a stormy sea, a glass of mineral water in his hand, observing the scene with a look of detached amusement. He radiated an aura of such profound self-assurance that he created his own gravitational pull. People noticed him. They whispered. Chloe noticed him. While Julian was cornered by a tech journalist, she found her eyes drifting to the mysterious stranger. He was handsome, but more than that, he was intriguing. He wasn't working the room. He was above it. As she moved to get a fresh glass of champagne, she found herself standing near the same photograph he was observing. It's powerful, isn't it? A deep voice with a faint, unplaceable European accent said beside her. She turned. It was him. Up close, his presence was even more formidable. It is, she managed her voice a little breathless. It feels chaotic and beautiful at the same time. A perfect metaphor for life, he said, his eyes scanning the photograph, not her. It's by a German artist I collect. He manages to capture the sublime terror of nature. Most people just see a pretty picture of a wave. He finally turned his gaze to her, and his eyes, a startlingly clear blue, seemed to look right through her. You don't strike me as someone who just sees the pretty picture. Chloe felt a jolt. He wasn't just complimenting her looks, he was complimenting her perception. It was a far more sophisticated line than any she had heard before. I try not to be, she said, her voice dropping to a more intimate register. I am Sebastian, he said, giving a slight bow of his head instead of offering a hand, a deliberately formal old-world gesture. Chloe, she replied. Before she could say more, Julian reappeared at her side. Everything okay? He asked, his arm sliding possessively around her waist. He eyed Sebastian with a flicker of territorial suspicion. Sebastian gave Julian a dismissive glance, a micro-expression of such profound disinterest that it was more insulting than any glare. Enjoy the evening, he said to Chloe, and then he simply turned and walked away, melting into the crowd. The seed was planted. Over the next 2 weeks, Sebastian Thorne executed Phase 3 with surgical precision. The encounters were always seemingly by chance, yet perfectly engineered to showcase the chasm between Julian's wealth and Sebastian's. One afternoon, as Chloe was having lunch with her friend Zara at an outdoor cafe in Soho, a sleek black Maybach purred to a stop at the curb. The driver opened the door, and Sebastian Thorne emerged. He spotted Chloe, and a slow smile spread across his face. He came over to their table. "Miss Vance, a pleasure to see you again," he said. Zara was staring, her jaw practically on the table. He didn't stay long. He was on his way to a meeting, something about geothermal prospecting in Iceland. He dropped the phrase so casually, it was like someone else mentioning a trip to the grocery store. Before leaving, he looked at the wilted rose in the small vase on their table. The next morning, the reception desk at Chloe's marketing firm called her. A delivery had arrived. It was a breathtaking arrangement of black baccarat roses, so dark they were almost velvet, with a simple card. These seemed more fitting. There was no phone number, no desperate plea for a date, just a gesture of overwhelming, mysterious elegance. Julian had sent her roses the week before, a standard dozen red ones that now seemed pathetic by comparison. The final decisive blow came a week later. Chloe was complaining to Julian over dinner about her frustration with her job. "They're so small-minded, Julian. I have ideas that could revolutionize their entire strategy, but they won't listen." "It takes time to climb the ladder, honey," Julian had said, a touch condescendingly. The very next day, a courier delivered a thick envelope to her office. Inside was a first-class ticket to Milan on a private charter dated for the upcoming weekend. The note was brief. "I'm told the finest business armor is forged in Italy. I have a fitting with my tailor Brioni. I've taken the liberty of arranging a consultation for you as well. A mind like yours deserves a wardrobe to match. A car will be at your apartment on Saturday morning. It is, of course, entirely your choice." This was it. This was the checkmate move. It wasn't just a gift. It was a challenge. It was an invitation into a world Julian Croft, for all his millions, couldn't access. The world of private jets, bespoke Italian suits, and casual globe-trotting power. She looked at the Cartier bracelet on her wrist. A few weeks ago, it had felt like the ultimate prize. Now it felt like a trinket, a consolation prize from the minor leagues. Her decision was swift and brutal. She broke up with Julian that night in his car after he'd taken her to dinner. He was talking about a potential site for a new distribution center in New Jersey. His world suddenly seemed so small, so domestic. "Julian, I don't think this is working," she said, her voice cool and practiced. He was stunned. "What are you talking about? We were just in Miami. I bought you—" "This isn't about what you can buy me," she lied, cutting him off. "It's about ambition. I need to be with someone who is bigger, who sees the whole world as a chessboard, not just a single market sector. I think you've gotten comfortable. I haven't." The words were chosen to wound his ego, the most vulnerable part of any man like him. He was speechless. He, Julian Croft, the tech titan, being told he wasn't ambitious enough. By the woman he had risked his marriage for. The irony was lost on him, submerged in the sting of rejection. "Is there someone else?" he finally asked, his voice tight with wounded pride. Chloe gave him a pitying look. "Don't be ridiculous," she said, leaving the question hanging just enough to be a yes. "I just think we want different things. I wish you the best, Julian. Truly. She got out of the car and walked away without looking back, leaving him sitting in the stunned, humiliated silence. She felt a pang of something. Not guilt, but perhaps the thrill of the kill. She had discarded a CEO. She was on her way to bigger things. Back in her apartment, she packed. She looked at the ticket to Milan, her heart pounding with triumphant anticipation. She was Chloe Vance, and she was about to be outfitted in the armor of a queen, ready to take her place beside a true king. She had played the game and won. The invitation to the Sterling Foundation Gala had arrived in the mail that day, a thick, creamy card with embossed lettering. She had initially planned to pressure Julian into taking her. Now she would arrive with Sebastian Thorne. It would be her true coronation. She imagined the look on the face of Julian's mousy, pregnant wife when she saw who had replaced her. It was all falling into place more perfectly than she could have ever imagined. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a symphony of opulence. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, dripped light onto a sea of New York's most powerful and influential figures. The theme of the Sterling Family Foundation Gala was Foundations for the Future, a celebration of the charity's work in funding education for underprivileged children. For the guests, however, it was the ultimate arena for showcasing status and wealth. Chloe Vance made her entrance feeling like she had finally arrived at the center of the universe. She wore a gown of liquid silver, a custom piece she'd acquired in Milan on her whirlwind trip with Sebastian. It clung to her every curve, audacious and dazzling. On her arm, however, was not the billionaire she expected. Sebastian had called her that afternoon, his voice a smooth apology. A sudden, unavoidable crisis with his Zurich office. A satellite launch had experienced a minor orbital deviation. The words were so fantastically important, so far beyond the scope of normal life, that she couldn't possibly be upset. "I will be there, my dear, I promise," he'd said. "But I will be late. Please go ahead. My driver will take you. I want you to make your entrance. You will be the most radiant woman in the room. I will find you the moment I arrive." So she had arrived alone, a move that was in itself a statement of confidence. She walked in, not as a +1, but as a woman who belonged. She could already feel the whispers, see the curious glances. Who is she? The story she would tell that she was waiting for. Sebastian Thorne would only add to her mystique. Her eyes scanned the room. Searching. She saw Julian almost immediately. He was standing near the bar, looking drawn and haggard, nursing a scotch. He saw her, and his face tightened with a mixture of pain and anger. Chloe met his gaze for a moment, giving him a small, pitying smile before turning away. The satisfaction was exquisite. Then she saw her. Catherine Sterling Croft was standing at the center of a small group, the undeniable focal point of the room. She was not in a flashy gown, but an elegant, deep blue velvet dress that fell gracefully over her pregnant form. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, the kind of quiet, heavy jewels that are passed down through generations, not bought on a whim. She wasn't trying to be the center of attention. She simply was. She radiated a serene, unshakable power that made Chloe's silver dress suddenly feel cheap and desperate. The two women's eyes met across the crowded room. Catherine offered a polite, enigmatic smile, a queen acknowledging a courtier. Determined to seize the moment, Chloe began to circulate, dropping Sebastian's name into conversations with calculated nonchalance. "Oh, this old thing. she'd say of her dress. "Sebastian insisted I have it made in Milan." Or, "Sebastian is hoping to make it, he's just dealing with a minor orbital deviation with one of his satellites." The reactions were a mixture of awe and confusion, which was exactly what she wanted. An hour into the event, a hush fell over the room as Catherine took to the stage to give the welcome address. She spoke eloquently about the Foundation's mission, her voice calm and clear. "We build foundations for children," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "But we must also be vigilant about the foundations of our own lives. We must ensure they are built on trust, integrity, and truth. Because when those foundations are weak, everything built upon them is at risk of collapse." The words seemed to hang in the air, freighted with a meaning that only a few people in the room could begin to grasp. Julian shifted uncomfortably. Chloe felt a prickle of unease. After her speech, Catherine descended the stage and began to move through the room. Chloe watched her, a predator sizing up her rival. She decided now was the time. She would go over, introduce herself, and deliver the final killing blow, the casual mention of her new superior benefactor. But before she could move, Catherine was walking directly toward her. "Miss Vance," Catherine said, her voice smooth as silk. "I'm Catherine Croft. I don't believe we've been formally introduced." Chloe was momentarily thrown. She had expected to be the one in control of this encounter. "It's a pleasure," Chloe said, recovering quickly. "Your speech was very moving." "Thank you," Catherine replied, her eyes holding Chloe's. "I saw you come in alone. Are you waiting for someone?" This was the opening. "I'm actually," Chloe said, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. "Sebastian Thorne. I'm not sure if you know him. He's quite private." Catherine's smile widened. "Sebastian Thorne," she repeated, tasting the name. "Yes, I know him very well. In fact, he's just arrived." Chloe's heart leapt. She turned her eyes, scanning the grand entrance, expecting to see the handsome, powerful man who was about to solidify her new life. "Allow me to make the introduction," Catherine said, and raised a hand. From the crowd, a man emerged, walking toward them. But it wasn't the suave European billionaire. It was Marcus Sterling, Catherine's brother. He was wearing the same bespoke suit and the Patek Philippe watch, but his expression was different. The cool detachment was gone, replaced by a look of wry, theatrical amusement. Chloe stared, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. "You're—" "Her brother," Marcus said, gesturing to Catherine. "Marcus Sterling, at your service." He gave a mocking bow. "Though for the past few weeks you've known me as Sebastian." The blood drained from Chloe's face. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. The murmurs around them, which had been a gentle buzz, were now a roaring in her ears. She looked from Marcus's smirking face to Catherine's calm, victorious expression. I don't understand," Chloe stammered, the words catching in her throat. "I think you do," Catherine said, her voice dropping to a cold, precise whisper, meant only for Chloe. "You thought you found a bigger fish. You thought you could discard my husband because you'd found a billionaire. But the billionaire was a fantasy, a story, one we wrote just for you." Chloe's eyes darted around. People were staring openly now, their phones half raised. She saw Olivia Brent standing nearby, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. She saw Julian frozen by the bar, his face a mask of dawning abject horror as he finally understood the full scope of what was happening. He wasn't just a cheated-on husband. He was a pawn in his wife's brutal, intricate game of revenge. He had been discarded and humiliated by Chloe, only to discover that his own wife had orchestrated the entire thing. "Every chance meeting," Marcus explained, enjoying his monologue. "Every gift, every flight. Every word I said to you was a line in a script written by my sister. You're not a gold digger, Chloe. You're just a fool. You fell for the oldest trick in the book, your own greed. The humiliation was a physical force pressing in on her, stealing the air from her lungs. The silver dress felt like a suit of armor that had just been melted onto her skin. Her grand entrance had become a public execution. My husband was weak, Catherine said, her voice cutting through Chloe's shock. And you are predatory. You both deserved a lesson in consequences. You, Miss Vance, wanted a foundation of wealth. Instead, you'll be a cautionary tale. And my husband. She glanced over at Julian, her eyes like chips of ice, has learned what it feels like to be deemed not enough. Chloe stood there, stripped bare, in the center of the glittering ballroom. The life she had fantasized about, the victory, she had tasted all of it, was a lie, a carefully constructed stage, and she was the only one who hadn't known she was an actor in a tragedy. She turned and fled, pushing through the crowd of stunned, whispering faces, the sound of their judgment chasing her out into the cold New York night. Catherine watched her go, her expression unreadable. She had not raised her voice. She had not cried. She had simply taken a predator, a problem, and dismantled it with the cold, quiet efficiency of a bomb disposal expert. She then turned her gaze back to her husband, who stood pale and broken across the room. The first part of her plan was complete. The second was about to begin. The aftermath of the gala was a bloodbath in the gossip columns and social media feeds. The story was too delicious to ignore the ambitious mistress, the fake billionaire, and the brilliant pregnant wife who had orchestrated the most elaborate revenge plot New York society had ever seen. The Sterling Gambit, one blog dubbed it. Chloe Vance became an overnight pariah. Her name, her face, her carefully curated ambition, all were now punchlines. She was fired from her marketing job for conduct unbecoming of the company's image. Her landlord started eviction proceedings. The friends who had cheered on her gold-digging like Zara vanished as if they'd never existed. Chloe was erased, a ghost haunting the city she had tried to conquer. But for Catherine, the public humiliation of her rival was only the first step. The true test, the real reconstruction, had to happen within the silent, opulent walls of their penthouse. Julian came home that night, or rather in the early hours of the morning, a broken man. The arrogance had been flayed from him, leaving behind a raw, quivering shame. He found Catherine in the living room, sitting in an armchair, bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp. The city lights twinkled behind her, oblivious. He started with the usual script. The apologies, the pleas, the self-flagellation. Catherine, I am so sorry. I was a fool, an idiot. I don't know what I was thinking. I love you. I love our baby. Please, please forgive me. The words tumbled out, desperate and rehearsed. Catherine listened patiently, her hands resting on her stomach. She let him exhaust himself, let the silence fall after his pathetic monologue. When she finally spoke, her voice was not angry. It was not hurt. It was the calm, measured voice of a CEO outlining the terms of a merger, and it terrified him more than any shouting match could have. Stop, she said simply. The word cut through his pleading. Your apology is irrelevant right now. It's a reflex. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you were made to look like a fool. The kind of sorrow that matters, the kind that leads to change, takes time to cultivate. You haven't had that time. What do you want me to do? He whispered, his voice cracking. I'll do anything. I know you will, she said. Because you're cornered. What I want is not for you to do anything. What I want is for you to understand why I did what I did." She stood up and walked to the window looking out over their kingdom. This wasn't just about punishing that woman, Julian. This was about you. You have a fundamental weakness. It's your ego. It needs constant validation. And when you felt the slightest bit neglected or bored, you sought it elsewhere. You didn't just have an affair. You risked everything. Our family, our future, the stability this child deserves for a cheap thrill and an ego boost. She turned back to him. "I could have divorced you. I could have taken half of your company and walked away. My family would have supported me. But that felt insufficient. Because the problem, your weakness, would remain. You would just find another woman and another, and our child would grow up with a father who was a revolving door of indiscretions." She walked to the desk and picked up a thick folder of documents her lawyer had drawn up that week. She placed it on the coffee table between them. "So this is what is going to happen. This is not a negotiation." He looked at the folder as if it were a bomb. "This is a post-nuptial agreement," she explained. "It transfers 60% of your shares in Croft Innovations, along with a controlling interest in our joint liquid assets, into a trust. A trust for our child of which I am the sole trustee until they come of age. You will retain your title as CEO. You will still draw your salary. But your decision-making power in the company and in our finances is now shared. I will have a permanent seat on the board. Your personal spending will be subject to review. We will be partners in the truest sense of the word, Julian. Your kingdom is no longer solely yours." He stared at her aghast. This was more than punishment. This was a coup, a complete restructuring of their entire existence. "You're taking my company," he breathed. "No," she corrected him calmly. "I am protecting our family's primary asset. You proved you were a poor steward, that you could be compromised. So I am installing a new system of checks and balances. Think of me as your personal board of directors." He saw the checkmate. If he refused, she would divorce him, and the ensuing scandal, combined with the loss of the Sterling family's backing and connections, would gut the company anyway. He would lose her his child and a massive chunk of his fortune. Her plan gave him a path, however narrow and humbling, to keep all three. "And us?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "What happens to us? We will stay married," Catherine said. "Our child will be born with a father and a mother under the same roof. You will sleep in the guest room. You will attend counseling. You will work every single day to earn back a fraction of the trust you shattered. Forgiveness is not on the table. It is not something I can give you right now. But you may in time earn the right to ask for it again." She laid out the new foundation of their life built upon the ashes of the old one. There was no passion in her voice, only purpose. She had seen the crack in their gilded cage, and instead of trying to patch it, she had torn it down and was now building a fortress in its place. A fortress to protect her child. Julian Croft, the tech visionary. The master of his universe finally understood true power. It wasn't in flashy deals or public acclaim. It was in the quiet, unyielding resolve of the woman standing before him. He had mistaken her grace for weakness, her composure for complacency. He now saw it for what it was, the calm surface of a deep and formidable ocean. He picked up a pen, his hand shaking, and signed the documents. He signed away control of the empire he had built, handing the keys to the woman he had betrayed. It was the end of his reign, and for Catherine and the child she carried, it was the beginning of a new, unshakable dynasty, founded not on a naive belief in love, but on the cold, hard certainty of control. Their future would not be a fairy tale, but it would be secure. And in their world, that was the only happily ever after that truly mattered. And there you have it, a story not just of infidelity, but of breathtaking strategy and icy revenge. Catherine Croft proves that the most dangerous woman is not the one who screams and throws plates, but the one who smiles, waits and dismantles her enemies with the precision of a chess grandmaster. She didn't just get even. She rewrote the rules of the entire game, securing her child's future and putting her husband firmly in his place. What did you think of her plan? Was it brilliant justice or a step too far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories of drama, intrigue, and powerful people getting exactly what they deserve, make sure to hit that like button and share this video with someone who appreciates a well-served plate of revenge. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next real-life drama. You never know whose perfect world is about to come crashing down.
Millionaire buys Mistress luxury gifts. With pregnant wife's money, wife makes them both pay publicly. They were the couple everyone envied, wealthy, beautiful, and expecting their first child. The world saw Oliver and Charlene Cooper as the epitome of success, smiling at galas and making heartfelt speeches about family. Behind the scenes, however, a burning secret threatened to tear their carefully curated lives apart. Charlene's joy at soon becoming a mother was overshadowed by one devastating discovery. The luxury gifts her husband showered upon an elusive mistress were paid for with Charlene's own inheritance. Betrayal and scandal ignited a storm, and Charlene was prepared to fight back. But would she dare to expose Oliver, no matter the cost? Charlene Cooper was not just a socialite, she was the heiress to the Wilkerson real estate empire lineage that had solid footing in San Diego's property development sector for over 6 decades. The Wilkerson name was synonymous with old money, refined taste, and philanthropic work that spanned across California. Growing up, Charlene rarely heard a no. Her father, George Wilkerson, had doted on her, granting every request with a smile. Yet despite that gilded upbringing, Charlene carried a soft heart and a genuine desire to do good. When she met Oliver Cooper at a charity event in Los Angeles, their romance played out like a fairy tale. Oliver was a self-made businessman, known for an athletic build that hinted at his college football days and a confident smile that made him an instant crowd favorite. He had built a modest tech startup into a multi-million-dollar operation, impressing the city's financial elite. They fell in love fast, too fast, according to some cynics. But for Charlene, who believed in grand gestures and cosmic connections, their whirlwind engagement and wedding felt like destiny. Marriage brought new joys and new pressures. Charlene found out she was pregnant 6 months into their union, while Oliver celebrated the news publicly, calling himself the luckiest man on earth. Charlene began to notice subtle shifts in his demeanor. He worked later hours, made strange phone calls from the balcony, and sometimes disappeared for business trips on painfully short notice. Charlene's close friend, Laura S. Wilkerson, a distant cousin who had married into another wealthy family, tried warning her that something felt off. But Charlene didn't want to believe Laura's suspicions. Not Oliver, her dream man, the one who had vowed to protect and cherish her. He couldn't possibly betray her. Yet tiny fractures were starting to form. On the day Charlene's pregnancy test came back positive, Oliver had seemed distracted, The typical euphoria of an expecting father lasted mere hours before he slipped out for a supposed investor meeting. Over the next weeks, she saw less of him than ever. The staff at their Beverly Hills mansion began whispering behind her back. Charlene wasn't oblivious. She was heartbroken, but too afraid of the truth to dig deeper. It was her father's unexpected passing that truly opened her eyes. George Wilkerson's death left Charlene with a sizable inheritance, enough for Oliver to realize that Charlene's pockets were even deeper than he had initially understood. Charlene, unaware of the lurking vultures, told Oliver she had come into a great deal of wealth. She wanted to donate a portion to a charity that supported homeless pregnant women, but Oliver suggested they wait to ensure stable cash flow for upcoming expansions. It sounded wise at the time, so Charlene agreed to hold off her philanthropic dream. Still, something nagged at her. She discovered unread emails, unaccounted for expenses, and hush-hush charges on their joint account labeled under consultancy fees. Worst of all, she found receipts from high-end boutiques like Hermes and Cartier, extravagant purchases that she had no memory of, and certainly had never received. The final straw came when an alert from her bank informed her that an enormous amount had been withdrawn to pay for a penthouse lease in downtown Los Angeles. This transaction screamed secrecy, and Charlene's entire body trembled with dread. In the quiet hours of early morning, as she felt her unborn child gently kick within her, Charlene realized she could no longer turn a blind eye. She had to uncover the truth, even if it shattered her heart and destroyed the man she once believed was her soulmate. In the days following her discovery, Charlene felt like an actress in a film noir, her every step cautious, her every smile forced. She needed answers, but she couldn't just walk up to Oliver and accuse him blindly. Instead, she decided to use the resources at her disposal. She hired a private investigator named Jackson Miller, a discreet figure with an impeccable reputation for uncovering hidden truths among Los Angeles's high-profile elite. Jackson, with his salt and pepper stubble and calm, analytical demeanor, met her at a quiet cafe in Westwood. They spoke in hushed tones as Charlene handed him the suspicious receipts and transaction records. He asked pointed questions about Oliver's habits, the times he'd come home late, any known associates he might confide in. Charlene listened to Jackson's methodology, a plan to track Oliver's movements, record his financial dealings, and dig into phone logs if necessary. Days turned into a week. Charlene stayed up at night, mind racing, imagining the worst possible scenarios. She told herself she might be overreacting, clinging to a slim hope that the transactions were for something innocuous, secret anniversary plans, perhaps. Yet her instincts told her otherwise. When Jackson finally called, Charlene's heart nearly stopped. Meeting him again at the same cafe, she arrived early, nerves buzzing. Jackson sat across from her, an empathy in his eyes that made her realize he'd done this many times before. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photographs of Oliver walking hand in hand with a striking brunette outside an exclusive boutique on Rodeo Drive. Another set of photos showed them picking out jewelry, with Oliver's arm confidently wrapped around the woman's waist. "She's Alexis Hart," Jackson said quietly, "a former runway model turned social media influencer. She has some moderate fame in the LA scene. She's known for her lavish lifestyle, usually financed by older, wealthy benefactors." Charlene's hands shook as she gripped the photos. The heartbreak was swift and brutal. She recognized the haute couture store in the background, places Oliver had never even invited her to. "There's more," Jackson added gently. "I discovered that the penthouse in downtown LA is in her name, but the payment route traces back to your inheritance account. I'm sorry, It was one thing to suspect a betrayal. It was another to see it displayed in undeniable proof. The pictures, the receipts, the joint property lease. Oliver was not just cheating on Charlene. He was using her father's money to do it. She felt her breath hitch, tears threatening to escape, but she forced them down. Charlene asked Jackson for everything: receipts, photos, timestamps. She paid him extra to collect any digital evidence he could find, from text messages to bank statements. If she was going to confront Oliver, she wanted an unassailable arsenal of facts. As she left the cafe, Charlene thought about her unborn child, the life forming within her. She recalled the day she had told Oliver the news. He had seemed so excited, so genuinely happy, yet how quickly that joy was overshadowed by this shameless affair. She realized she was no longer just a spurned wife. She was about to be a mother, and everything in her screamed that she had to protect her child from the toxic lies. Oliver brought into their home. That evening, Oliver returned late again. Charlene feigned sleep, carefully controlling her breathing so he wouldn't notice her tears or the heartache searing through her. As he tucked himself into bed, she felt the mattress shift with his weight, a weight that now felt heavier than ever. Deep inside, a new resolve began to form. Charlene would do whatever it took to ensure that justice was served, and she wasn't afraid to make it public if need be. Each passing day, the tension in the Cooper household intensified. Oliver acted more brazenly, sending text messages in Charlene's presence, stepping out for phone calls he labeled as urgent investor matters. A lesser woman might have confronted him immediately, brandishing evidence. But Charlene was no novice to power plays and feuds. She had observed enough corporate tussles in her father's company to know that timing was everything. In her father's study, a room lined with leather-bound books and old trophies, Charlene prepared her own strategy. Late one night, she laid out the evidence Jackson had collected: timelines, photos, and the sickening bank statements. She studied them like a general planning for war. She made sure to store duplicates safely with Laura Wilkerson, her trusted cousin, in case Oliver discovered her plans. Ironically, Oliver's behavior grew kinder during the day, as though he sensed her withdrawal. He started bringing her roses in an attempt to mask his guilt, or maybe to maintain the facade. He accompanied her to a routine prenatal checkup for the first time in weeks, acting every bit the devoted husband. The nurses at the clinic cooed over how lucky Charlene was to have such a supportive partner. The bitterness in her throat made it hard to swallow. One evening, Oliver suggested they dine at Spago in Beverly Hills, a place they often frequented during their courtship. Charlene agreed, thinking it might provide an opportunity to gauge his reactions. The hush of the Michelin-starred restaurant, the attentive waitstaff, and the candle-lit ambience all felt dreamlike. But beneath the surface, Charlene's anger simmered. Over foie gras and a meticulously prepared lamb dish, Oliver tried to discuss baby names. Charlene forced a smile, swirling her sparkling water while he sipped a vintage red. She asked him if everything was all right at work, if finances were stable. Oliver hesitated, quickly reassuring her that his tech ventures were thriving. "So we're still set on donating to that shelter project, right?" Charlene ventured, referencing her desire to support homeless, pregnant women. He coughed, face tight. "Yes, of course, but let's hold off until next quarter. I just need to ensure certain expansions go through." Charlene simply nodded, absorbing this new wave of deception. Her father's inheritance was being siphoned for Alexis Hart's penthouse and expensive tastes, yet Oliver continued to manipulate her philanthropic dreams. Back home, he went straight to shower, leaving his phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. Charlene's heart pounded. She told herself she wasn't the type to invade privacy, but the truth was already out there. She was dealing with a man who had no qualms betraying her, Nerves tense, she picked up the phone, scrolling through messages. Most were harmless business chats, but one thread stood out: Alexis. She opened it, scanning a conversation that made her stomach twist. Alexis bragged about their penthouse, how the city view from the balcony at dawn was worth every cent, how she'd love a new Chanel bag to match the latest couture she'd posted on Instagram. Oliver's replies were full of heart emojis and promises to fulfill her every desire. A wave of nausea overtook Charlene, more intense than any pregnancy sickness she'd felt before. She barely managed to exit the screen and place the phone back before Oliver emerged. He kissed her on the cheek, his lips cold to her now. All she could do was force a painfully fake smile and wait for the next move. That night, sleep evaded her. Memories of happier times replayed in her mind, their honeymoon in Bora Bora, dancing under the stars at a friend's wedding. The day. Oliver surprised her with breakfast in bed just to see her smile. She clung to these fleeting good memories, mourning the reality that such love was probably never real to begin with. But she also felt the shift in her soul. The heartbreak was solidifying into anger, and the anger was transforming into an unwavering resolve. Charlene knew that if Oliver had the audacity to use her money to fund his mistress's lavish lifestyle, she owed it to her father's legacy and to herself to make them both pay, and not quietly. A few days later, Charlene found herself staring at Alexis Hart's social media profiles. The woman was stunning tall, with an enviable figure, sultry green eyes, and perfectly styled brunette waves. Her Instagram feed was a curated display of luxury, private jets, high-end restaurants, and designer clothes from Paris. She had close to 1 million followers, drawn to her constant parade of opulence and aspirational living. Charlene felt a cold detachment as she clicked through pictures of Alexis flaunting the diamond necklace Oliver had purchased. She recognized it from the receipts. A brand new photo had Alexis perched on a velvet chair inside the downtown penthouse. The skyline behind her, the caption read, "Home, sweet home, filled with love and endless possibilities." She scrolled through comments from adoring fans, many praising her glamorous lifestyle and inspirational success. The irony was nauseating. Charlene thought of the heartbreak behind those shimmering surfaces, the lies fueling Alexis's brand. Charlene's father's money that was meant to be used for philanthropic work was going straight into Alexis's pockets. Deciding to gather more intel, Charlene used a fake social media account to follow Alexis's stories. She was stunned to see a recurring cameo, Oliver's hand, the same gold watch she had given him on their wedding day. Sometimes Alexis's live videos captured the muffled sound of Oliver's voice in the background. They thought they were being subtle, but for Charlene, it was a direct punch to the gut. Shortly after, Charlene discovered that Alexis was scheduled to attend a fashion event in downtown Los Angeles. It wasn't a massive public show, more a private preview for wealthy potential buyers. Charlene secured an invite through a friend, deciding it was time to see Alexis in person. The event was held in a swanky gallery, lights dimmed to highlight the models gliding down a makeshift runway. Charlene arrived in a classic black sheath dress that hugged her small baby bump discreetly. Despite her turmoil, she emanated poise, her posture straight, her chin held high. She spotted Alexis near the front row, surrounded by admirers. The mistress was elegantly dressed in a gold sequined gown, accessorized with the exact diamond necklace Charlene had seen on Instagram. Her laugh tinkled through the air as she relished the attention. Charlene approached cautiously, not wanting to cause a scene. She pretended to admire a piece of couture on display until she was near enough to hear Alexis's conversation with a friend. They gossiped about men, parties, and brand sponsorships. Alexis boasted about how her man was more generous than any sponsor she had ever encountered. Charlene's stomach twisted in revulsion, but she maintained her composure. One glance at Alexis's face, and Charlene felt an overwhelming wave of empathy for herself, for the unborn baby, for the life she had believed in. Alexis, for all her glamorous facade, seemed cunning, but not necessarily formidable. She was a symptom, not the root cause. Charlene's ire was saved mostly for Oliver, the man who had orchestrated this entire betrayal. Still, Alexis wasn't innocent. She was knowingly involved with a married man, and even flaunting the spoils of that affair. Before Charlene turned to leave, Alexis's gaze slid over her. Their eyes locked for a moment. Alexis gave Charlene a fleeting glance, perhaps seeing her as another wealthy guest, and then looked away without a hint of recognition. There was a moment's temptation for Charlene to walk up and introduce herself as Oliver's pregnant wife, but she resisted. She had bigger plans. A public meltdown at a fashion event might have satisfied a lesser impulse, but Charlene needed a carefully crafted retribution, one that would leave both Oliver and Alexis reeling in the most public way possible. When Charlene stepped out into the brisk night air, she felt the baby kick. A soothing wave of maternal protectiveness coursed through her. "Don't worry," she whispered softly, placing a gentle hand on her belly. "Mummy's got this." Fueled by the injustices she'd discovered, Charlene began assembling a legal and social strategy. She reached out to her late father's trusted attorney, Deborah T. Carmichael, an older woman whose steely gaze and impeccable knowledge of the law had guided the Wilkerson family through countless high-stakes disputes. Sitting in Deborah's glass-walled office, Charlene laid out the situation. Deborah, with her silver hair pulled into a neat chignon, listened intently, occasionally leaning forward to examine the evidence Charlene provided. After a lengthy pause, she said, "We have grounds for a significant lawsuit, embezzlement of inheritance funds, possible misappropriation, the list goes on. But Charlene, you need to be ready for a brutal fight. Oliver might not back down easily, and your personal life will be under public scrutiny." Charlene took a deep breath, feeling a tremor course through her. "I need to do this, Deborah. I won't let him or that woman continue to siphon off what my father left behind. And I need to protect my baby." Deborah nodded, taking down notes. "We'll move forward carefully. I'll assemble a forensic accounting team. In the meantime, you need to keep a low profile, act like everything is normal at home. We don't want him suspecting we're onto him yet. Once we have a solid case, we'll confront him with it." Legal measures were only part of Charlene's plan. She had a more personal vendetta. She wanted Oliver and Alexis to face the consequences on a social platform. After all, Oliver thrived on maintaining a polished public image as a philanthropic millionaire, and Alexis, her entire career hinged on her glamorous, envy-inducing social media persona. Charlene resolved to strike them where it would hurt the most, in public reputation. A stroke of inspiration led Charlene to her father's old diaries, which she discovered tucked away in a carved mahogany chest. George Wilkerson had meticulously recorded notes about people he did business with, favors, secrets, alliances. Reading through them, Charlene was reminded how alliances could be forged or broken with a single phone call. She discovered a longtime ally of her father's, Mark Remington, a prominent journalist with the Los Angeles Tribune. Mark and George had teamed up once to expose a crooked real estate mogul. The subsequent scandal had garnered front-page headlines, and Mark owed his career boost to George. Charlene wasn't sure if Mark would remember her, but she decided to find out. She called the Tribune, leaving a message explaining that she was George Wilkerson's daughter and needed to speak with Mark. Within an hour, she got a call back. Mark's voice was warm with reminiscence as he recounted how much her father had supported him. After exchanging pleasantries, Charlene offered Mark an exclusive story that would expose betrayal, financial misuse, and the lavish downfall of a prominent tech millionaire. Mark hesitated, This is about Oliver Cooper, isn't it? I've seen him around, and he's something of a rising star in the business section. Are you certain you want to go public? Charlene's throat tightened. I'm certain, but I need your promise that this will be handled with integrity. This isn't just gossip, it's about justice and ensuring no one else gets hurt. Mark agreed to meet in person, requesting a time and place. They settled on a discreet cafe near the Tribune's office. As Charlene hung up, she felt a surge of adrenaline. It was one thing to plan revenge quietly, but quite another to involve a well-known journalist who had the power to break a career. In those days of preparatory hush, Charlene found small comfort in her unborn child's growing kicks. She allowed herself moments of calm, sometimes drifting to the nursery she had started decorating. She would stand there in the soft glow of pastel paint, letting her imagination wander to a future free from Oliver's deceit. Yet every time she saw Oliver, her resolve hardened. One late night, she heard him chatting on the phone in hushed tones, finishing with "I miss you too," before ending the call. The next morning, he cheerfully asked if she needed anything for her prenatal vitamins. The audacity left her speechless, but it also reaffirmed her mission. She would not remain a helpless victim. Oliver Cooper was not a man who ever considered himself the villain. Born to modest means in Sacramento, he had clawed his way up, starting with a partial football scholarship that got him through college. When an injury ended his sports dreams, he discovered a knack for sales and networking. He joined a tech startup, impressing investors with his bold pitches and near-fearless approach. Over time, he built his own enterprise, Cooper Innovations, attracting venture capital, forging partnerships, and eventually becoming a darling of the tech press. He prided himself on defying expectations. To Oliver, life was a game of strategy, and he believed that moral lines were negotiable if the end justified the means. Meeting Charlene Wilkerson seemed like the perfect alignment of business and pleasure. He was genuinely drawn to her kindness and sophistication, but he was also captivated by the resources she possessed. Their relationship skyrocketed his social standing. Her father's connections opened doors that would have remained locked for years. However, Oliver's appetite for success proved insatiable. He was enthralled by the power he wielded and the attention he could command, especially from women who admired his status. The day he set eyes on Alexis Hart at a high-end nightclub, desire and opportunity collided. He was bored with the predictability of marriage, or so he told himself, and Alexis represented the spark he craved. But Alexis demanded more than mere attention. She wanted designer bags, exclusive penthouse living, and the feeling of being kept by a wealthy lover. Initially, Oliver believed he could handle the financial burden. His ventures were doing well, after all. But soon, Alexis's cravings escalated. She wanted a place bigger than her old condo. She wanted jewelry that would stand out on her Instagram feed. Oliver found ways to sneak money out of joint accounts, forging invoices and funneling funds. When the news of Charlene's inheritance landed, Oliver saw a stopgap solution to maintain Alexis's extravagant tastes until he could close a few major tech deals. It was a gamble, but in his mind, he had it under control. He had no qualms about forging Charlene's signature on certain transactions or convincing her that the funds were tied up in essential expansions. He believed Charlene would never suspect. She was gentle, trusting, and occupied with her pregnancy. Little did he know, behind Charlene's calm demeanor lay the iron will of George Wilkerson's daughter. One afternoon, as he sipped a whiskey at a private lounge, Oliver scrolled through Alexis's latest Instagram photos. His chest puffed with pride at the thought of having such a dazzling woman by his side, albeit in secret. Alexis's messages demanded a new Hermes Birkin bag she had spotted. Oliver texted back with reassurance, hoping she'd remain satisfied for a while longer. Within a few minutes, Charlene called. Oliver almost didn't answer, but something in her voicemail, "We need to talk about something important," made him pick up. She requested he come home early for dinner, sounding sweet yet firm. Oliver felt a prickle of uncertainty. Charlene rarely insisted on altering his schedule, but he brushed it off, thinking perhaps she wanted to share some baby-related development. Oliver had no clue that the carefully laid trap was about to snap shut around him. He still believed he was the master of his own destiny, orchestrating two separate worlds without consequence. What he failed to realize was that his illusions were hanging by a thread, and Charlene held the scissors. Charlene decided the moment had come to set her plan in motion. With Deborah T., Carmichael's legal advice, and the mountain of evidence courtesy of Jackson Miller's investigations, she was ready to confront Oliver. She'd been hiding her fury behind sweet smiles for too long, and every day that passed felt like a betrayal of her own soul. It was a Monday evening when Oliver walked into their Beverly Hills mansion, expecting a quiet dinner. Instead, he found Charlene sitting in the living room, dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue blouse, her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. On the table before her lay two neatly stacked piles of papers and a laptop. Oliver frowned, loosening his tie. "What's all this?" he asked, forcing a chuckle. "You look serious." Charlene gestured for him to sit. "We need to talk, Oliver. Please." He obliged, though she could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. Charlene opened the laptop, revealing photos of Oliver and Alexis shopping together, arms wrapped intimately. A slideshow advanced to screenshots of text messages, receipts from her inheritance account, and, finally, the penthouse lease documents. She didn't have to say a word. The evidence spoke for itself. Oliver's face went pale. He attempted a laugh, nervous and hollow. What is this? Where did you get these?" Charlene's voice was steady, surprising even herself. "That's not the question you should be asking. You should be asking why you thought you could use my father's money to fund your mistress's lavish lifestyle." Oliver blanched, standing up in an attempt to regain control. "Let's calm down. This is a misunderstanding." Charlene rose too, a hand instinctively resting on her pregnant belly. "Don't you dare feed me that lie. I've traced every cent you took from my inheritance. I've hired a private investigator. My lawyer, Deborah Carmichael, has drawn up the legal consequences of your actions. Everything is right there." She pointed at the second stack of documents that outlined a potential lawsuit for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of trust. Oliver tried to speak, but he choked on his words, finally managing a feeble apology. "I never meant to hurt you. I just needed time. I was going to replace the money." His excuses sounded pitiful, even to himself. Charlene's eyes flashed with anger. "My father's money was meant for charity, Oliver. And if that wasn't enough, you brought another woman into our marriage. I'm pregnant with your child, and this is how you repay me." He stepped forward, arms outstretched, but Charlene recoiled. "Don't," she warned, her tone sharper than ever before. For a moment, guilt and panic flooded his face. He started to stammer. "We can fix this. I'll leave her, pay you back." It was just a mistake, a fling. Charlene's hollow laugh cut through his words. "A fling that cost me millions of dollars and my trust. Don't you dare trivialize this." Oliver looked around helplessly, scanning the room like a trapped animal. He saw the unwavering determination in Charlene's posture and realized how dire his situation truly was. She wasn't the naive, trusting heiress he'd married. She was George Wilkerson's daughter, a woman with the resources and willpower to ruin him. Before Oliver could plead further, Charlene handed him an envelope. Inside was a formal letter from Deborah's firm, outlining Charlene's conditions: immediate return of all misused funds, complete severance from Alexis Hart, and an agreement that, if Oliver didn't comply, Charlene would file a lawsuit and expose him publicly. Oliver's hands shook as he read. Beads of sweat broke out on his forehead. He tried to muster defiance, but the weight of Charlene's evidence and the potential fallout was immense. If the press got hold of this, his business could collapse, investors might bail, and his once venerated public image would be shattered. Swallowing hard, he finally spoke in a subdued voice, "I'll do what it takes. Just give me a chance to fix this." Charlene didn't respond, her glare cold enough to freeze him in place. Then she stood, taking one final look at the man she once believed was her life partner. Without another word, she left the room, the quiet click of her heels echoing in Oliver's ears. The once invincible entrepreneur sank into the nearest chair, realizing the gravity of what he had done. His illusions were no more. The facade lay in pieces around him. Word traveled fast in certain circles, especially among the wealthy. Alexis' heart sensed something was off the moment. Oliver declined to accompany her to a high-profile after-party. He had always jumped at the chance to show her off, to revel in the attention their illicit romance garnered. Now he was distant, texting her curt replies that lacked his usual over-the-top affection. Their next face-to-face encounter took place at the penthouse Oliver funded. Alexis had arranged a private chef to cook dinner, hoping to create a romantic ambiance. She lounged in a silk robe, sipping champagne while she waited. But when Oliver arrived, tense and brooding, the sparks she usually felt fizzled into concern. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice sultry but tinged with worry. Oliver paced the room, ignoring the tantalizing smell of garlic and rosemary wafting from the kitchen. He finally turned to her. "Charlene found out," he said simply, face drawn. Alexis's eyes widened. She'd always feared this day might come, but she had grown complacent, believing Oliver had it all under control. "So what? You can smooth things over, right?" He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "It's worse than that. She's threatening legal action and public exposure. I could lose everything, my company, my reputation. She wants the money back, Alexis. Millions of dollars." Alexis's mouth fell open. She was not just an idle bystander in this drama. If Oliver's finances were frozen or compromised, she'd lose the lifestyle she'd grown to love. "What about me?" she demanded, voice sharp with panic. "We have a lease here. Is she shutting that down too?" Oliver nodded grimly. "Yes, she wants me to cut ties immediately." Alexis's lip curled in frustration. She had no intention of giving up her penthouse or the benefits she reaped from being Oliver's mistress. She'd invested time in him, in their brand of secrecy, and she wasn't about to watch it vanish. "Then fight her," Alexis snapped. "Hire the best lawyers. She can't just ruin your life because of a marital spat." Oliver laughed bitterly. "Marital spat? You don't understand. She has evidence of misappropriating her inheritance. She can press charges. The court will side with her, and I'll be labeled a thief." Alexis's expression hardened. Fear and anger churned within her. "You told me you had this under control, that your marriage was more of a facade, and you could get the money whenever you wanted." He flinched. "It's complicated, Alexis. Charlene's father was a powerful man, and she inherited not just money, but influence. People are lining up to help her, and she's pregnant with my child. Even the optics of that are damning for me." Something unreadable flickered in Alexis's eyes, perhaps a momentary guilt. Then, just as swiftly, it was replaced by self-preservation. "What do you plan to do? Beg her forgiveness? Maybe you should just divorce her. Then we can finally be together openly." Oliver glared at her, frustration welling up. "Don't you get it? A divorce would be a nightmare right now. She'd drag me through the courts, and I'd lose all support from my investors. They don't want to be associated with scandal. And with the baby on the way, she'd get sympathy, and I'd be a pariah." Alexis sighed, sinking onto the tufted velvet couch. "Fine, you handle the legal mess. But don't expect me to sit around waiting. I have to protect my own interests." Oliver stared at her, realization dawning that Alexis's devotion was as conditional as her lifestyle was extravagant. He had hoped for support, maybe an embrace that would ease his anxiety. Instead, her cold practicality only underscored the fact that she was with him for what he could provide. "I can't keep funding everything," he admitted, voice weary. "Charlene wants the money returned. I'll try to stall, but eventually I have to close deals to pay back what I took." Alexis's expression darkened at the suggestion that the money flow might stop. She rose, crossing her arms. "You'd better figure out a way to fix this, Oliver. I'm not going back to some dingy apartment or giving up the lifestyle I've built. If you let her win, you'll lose me too." Her ultimatum hit him like a slap. He realized that in his quest for success and pleasure, he'd bound himself to two demanding women, one with legitimate moral and legal standing, and the other with a voracious appetite for luxury. As Alexis retreated to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her, Oliver sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. In that moment, he felt the walls closing in. There was no easy path forward. If he complied with Charlene, Alexis would likely walk away, leaving him high and dry. If he fought Charlene, he risked public disgrace and possible legal ruin. Faced with these impossible choices, Oliver finally understood that his empire built on lies and grand illusions was on the brink of collapse. While Oliver floundered, Charlene assembled a circle of support that fortified her resolve. She confided in Laura Wilkerson, her trusted cousin and friend, who offered emotional solace and practical help. Laura connected Charlene with a public relations consultant, Samantha Layton, well known for handling high-profile scandals. Samantha had a polished demeanor, her every word measured as she addressed Charlene's concerns in her sleek downtown office. "Your story is compelling," Samantha noted, scanning the summary of Charlene's predicament. A pregnant heiress, betrayed by her husband, who used her inheritance to spoil a mistress. It's headline gold, but we must manage the narrative carefully, or it could spiral out of control. Charlene nodded. "I don't want to be seen as vindictive, but I need justice, and I won't stand by while my father's legacy is exploited for someone else's greed." Samantha offered a small smile. "Understood. We'll position you as a woman standing up for her unborn child's future and safeguarding charitable interests. This is about more than revenge, it's about principle." Meanwhile, Deborah Carmichael was finalizing the legal angle. She arranged a meeting with Oliver's lawyers to present Charlene's demands: immediate repayment of the stolen funds, a transfer of any assets purchased with her inheritance back to her name, and a formal separation agreement that protected Charlene from any further financial wrongdoing. If Oliver refused, a lawsuit would proceed. Charlene was also preparing for her clandestine meeting with Mark Remington, the journalist. She knew that if Oliver tried to strong-arm her or manipulate public sentiment, she would have an ally in the press. Late one afternoon, she slipped on a simple beige trench coat, pulled her hair into a low ponytail, and headed to a small cafe near the Los Angeles Tribune's office. Mark Remington was already seated at a corner table, nursing a cappuccino. He stood when he saw her, greeting her with a warm handshake. Charlene recognized the lines of age and experience around his eyes, a testament to his years in investigative journalism. They spoke in subdued tones, Charlene handing him sanitized versions of the evidence photos, financial documents, text message screenshots. Mark skimmed through them, occasionally raising an eyebrow. "This is thorough," he remarked. "If this goes public, Oliver Cooper's reputation will take a massive hit, possibly irreversible." Charlene exhaled shakily. "I'm aware. I don't relish destroying him, but he left me no choice. I won't let him or his mistress keep benefiting from my father's legacy." Mark leaned in, eyes earnest. I'll do this story justice. I owe your father a lot, and I respect you for how you're handling this. Just be prepared. Once it's out there, you can't control every headline." Charlene nodded. She knew the risk, but it was one she was willing to take. In the days that followed, Charlene continued her routine as if nothing were amiss. She attended prenatal yoga sessions, visited her doctor, and occasionally appeared at society luncheons. Yet beneath the surface calm, she was orchestrating the downfall of the man who had wronged her. Oliver sensed her quiet determination, and it made him restless. He spent hours on the phone with potential investors, desperate to secure funds to repay Charlene. But rumors started swirling that Oliver Cooper was in financial trouble, and potential backers grew wary. Alexis grew impatient too. She posted cryptic messages on social media about undying love, turning into betrayal, likely aimed at stirring sympathy. But the more her followers asked questions, the more Alexis retreated into cryptic silence, perhaps realizing that Charlene's wrath could explode any day now. And so the stage was set. Charlene stood, strong and resolute, armed with legal, PR, and journalistic firepower. Oliver flailed between desperation and denial, while Alexis feared losing her golden goose. The world outside remained oblivious for the moment, but soon the carefully constructed illusions would crumble in a blaze of public scandal. Charlene could almost taste the retribution, and she knew it would be served cold. The unraveling began on a crisp Wednesday morning when the Los Angeles Tribune ran a front-page teaser: high-profile tech entrepreneur accused of misusing wife's inheritance. Though the article did not name Oliver directly, those in elite circles recognized the clues pointing to Cooper innovations. Within hours, social media started buzzing. The cryptic references matched rumors of Oliver's recent desperation to secure funds, and the name Charlene Wilkerson Cooper trended on local Twitter feeds. Paparazzi camped outside their mansion, trying to capture the first shots of the wealthy heiress at the center of the scandal. Oliver woke to a barrage of phone calls and texts from colleagues, investors, and even relatives who had read the story. He rushed downstairs, where Charlene calmly sipped tea at the dining room table, a copy of the Los Angeles Tribune laid out next to her plate. "What did you do?" he demanded, voice hoarse. She met his gaze unflinching. "I gave them the truth," she said simply. He inhaled sharply. "You've put my entire company at risk. Do you know how this makes me look?" Charlene stood, her pregnant belly prominent beneath her blouse. "Yes, I do. And you're the one who put us here. Now it's time to face the consequences." Oliver shook his head in disbelief. Before he could say more, his phone rang again. He retreated to his study, slamming the door behind him. Charlene could hear his muffled voice, shouting something about media spin and damage control. By midday, a second wave of online articles appeared, some even naming Alexis Hart as a possible mistress. Alexis's Instagram followers flooded her posts with questions. Instead of responding, Alexis turned off comments, fueling further speculation. Soon, national gossip columns picked up the story, hungry to showcase a salacious tale of betrayal and scandal. Charlene's phone buzzed incessantly with messages of support from friends and family, plus the occasional harassing call from curious strangers. Laura Wilkerson came by to check on Charlene, offering to help manage the chaos. Meanwhile, Samantha Layton, Charlene's PR consultant, was busy issuing statements. Mrs. Cooper prioritizes her unborn child's well-being and is cooperating fully with legal proceedings to reclaim misused funds. She remains committed to charitable initiatives, despite the challenging circumstances. Investors in Cooper Innovations began to panic. Some threatened to pull out if Oliver did not address the allegations immediately and clear his name. Desperate to salvage his company, Oliver arranged a press conference for the following day at a luxury hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Charlene stayed silent that evening, ignoring Oliver's attempts to discuss strategy. She retired to the nursery, gently running her hands over the crib she had picked out weeks ago, her mind replaying the chain of events that led them to this precipice. Though she felt a twinge of sorrow for the public nature of the scandal, her conviction held firm Oliver had to be held accountable. That night, the media frenzy exploded. Popular talk shows hosted panels discussing the riches to rags angle, speculation about prenups, and the morality of Oliver's actions. On one late-night show, a comedian quipped, "Misusing your pregnant wife's inheritance to fund a mistress?" In LA, that's like trying to swim with sharks while bleeding. Bad idea. Charlene went to bed early, telling herself that tomorrow would be the beginning of the end. As she switched off the lights, she felt the baby kick and whispered a promise to her child, "This chaos won't define us. I'll make sure of it." Outside, the press huddled in clusters, cameras flashing whenever a light turned on in the windows. Inside, the once luxurious fortress felt like a cage of secrets and sorrow. And somewhere across town, Alexis Hart watched her phone, dread filling her heart as she realized she was not merely a bystander, she was about to be publicly named and shamed as well. The next morning, Oliver stood behind a podium in the opulent ballroom of the Regency Hotel. He wore a tailored suit, trying to project calm authority, yet his hands shook as he adjusted the microphone. Rows of reporters, photographers, and camera crews filled the space, waiting to broadcast his statement live. Charlene opted not to attend in person. Instead, she watched the live stream from the comfort of her father's study, with Laura by her side. It wasn't her place to shield Oliver from the consequences. This was his mess. Clearing his throat, Oliver began, "I'd like to address the recent allegations circulating in the media. First, I want to make it clear that I have the utmost respect for my wife, Charlene Cooper, and her family legacy. Any suggestion that I have intentionally misappropriated funds is premature and not based on the full facts." His speech was carefully scripted, peppered with phrases like misunderstanding and temporary financial reallocation. He dodged direct mention of Alexis Hart, only vaguely referring to private matters that do not concern the public. Reporters unleashed a flurry of questions. "Is it true you used your wife's inheritance for personal gain? Have you been unfaithful to your wife, who is pregnant with your child? What about the penthouse property leased in Alexis Hart's name?" Oliver's calm facade began to crack. He tried to deflect, insisting that no wrongdoing occurred, but the wave of skepticism was overwhelming. The final straw came when a tenacious reporter from a local affiliate stood up and said, "We have documents showing your signature authorizing transfers from your wife's inheritance to fund the lease of Miss Hart's penthouse." "Care to comment?" Oliver stammered. The entire ballroom seemed to collectively hold its breath. Finally he mumbled, "I have no comment on Miss Hart's personal finances." Camera shutters clicked frantically, capturing the moment. Online, viewers mocked him on social media for his non-denial. Memes sprouted, picturing Oliver's sweaty brow next to the tagline, "No comment." From the study, Charlene watched, feeling an odd mix of triumph and sadness. This was the father of her child, after all, and seeing him humiliated publicly was bittersweet. But she reminded herself of the betrayal, the stolen money, and the mistress. Actions had consequences, and Oliver was finally facing his. After the press conference, Oliver fled the hotel amidst jeering questions. His phone lit up with missed calls and messages from business partners. He tried calling Charlene, but she didn't pick up. When she finally checked her messages, there was one tearful voicemail from Oliver, begging for a chance to talk. She ignored it, letting her lawyer Deborah handle all formal communications. News coverage that evening was brutal, with every network dissecting Oliver's shaky performance. Some panelists predicted a swift downfall for Cooper Innovations. Stocks tied to his ventures took a hit as anxious investors bailed. Meanwhile, tabloids emblazoned images of Alexis, dredging up her modeling past and speculation about her connection to Oliver. At a small bar on the outskirts of town, Alexis Hart watched the broadcast with a sinking feeling. A friend tapped her shoulder sympathetically, but Alexis shrugged it off, her mind whirling. She realized her chance of forging a respectable public image was slipping away. She cursed Oliver for his failure to control the narrative. In the hours that followed, Charlene received a supportive call from Mark Remington at the Los Angeles Tribune. "Well, that was quite the show," he remarked. "Are you satisfied?" Charlene sighed. "It's not over yet, but this is the start of him taking responsibility. Thank you for exposing the story with integrity, Mark." He wished her well, and Charlene ended the call, sinking back into the leather chair in her father's study. Laura squeezed her hand, offering a gentle smile. "You did the right thing," Laura said. "Your father would be proud." Exhausted, Charlene allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. She knew she was forever changed by this ordeal, but as she stroked her belly, she silently vowed that her child's life would be built on honesty, love, and dignity, everything Oliver had so woefully betrayed. In the wake of Oliver's disastrous press conference, Alexis Hart found herself at the center of a spiraling scandal. Hounded by trolls and abandoned by sponsors, she hid in the penthouse, watching her once glamorous life crumble. She repeatedly called Oliver, but he offered no solutions. His resources were now diverted to crisis management. Desperate, Alexis agreed to an exclusive tabloid interview, hoping to salvage her reputation. Her plan backfired spectacularly. She stumbled over her lies, contradicting herself on camera and exposing how deeply she'd known about Charlene's inheritance. The public turned on her, mocking her attempts at portraying herself as a victim. Brands cut ties, and her agent dropped her altogether. Realizing she had lost her golden ticket, Alexis packed up the designer items Oliver had bought her. With a final, scornful text to him, "I'm done. Good luck with your mess." She fled Los Angeles, leaving behind a ruinous legacy as the mistress who fell from grace. With Alexis gone, Oliver found himself cornered, facing a wife armed with an army of attorneys and a brewing lawsuit that threatened to dismantle his entire empire. Deborah T. Carmichael finalized the formal complaint, detailing every instance of financial misappropriation. The documents demanded full restitution, punitive damages, and legal fees. Charlene sent Oliver a final ultimatum through Deborah: settle out of court under these terms or face a very public trial. The settlement terms included: 1. Immediate transfer of any remaining misused funds back to Charlene's account. 2. Liquidation of certain Cooper Innovations assets to repay her inheritance. 3. A public apology and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. 4. An agreement that Charlene would maintain full custody of their unborn child, with Oliver having supervised visitation unless future court orders stipulated otherwise. Oliver balked at the custody demand, but even he recognized he had no leverage left. His name was mud in the media, investors were distancing themselves, and every day brought new rumors about potential lawsuits from minority shareholders who felt misled. At a final negotiation session, Oliver arrived looking haggard, dark circles under his eyes. His once confident posture deflated. Charlene sat across a mahogany table, Deborah by her side. The tension in the air was palpable. "What do you want from me?" Oliver asked, voice hollow. "My company is in shambles. I can't magically produce millions overnight." Charlene stared at him, remembering the charming suitor who once vowed eternal devotion. That man was gone, replaced by a shell. "Figure it out," she replied coldly. "Sell your shares. Downsize operations, do whatever it takes. I'm not responsible for your choices. Oliver's eyes flickered with a mixture of shame and desperation. He turned to Deborah, attempting to negotiate the custody terms, but Charlene stood firm. My child will not be subjected to your toxic lifestyle. Earn the right to be in their life again. Deborah slid the settlement papers across the table. Oliver took a shaky breath and scribbled his signature. The weight of finality descended on the room. From her seat, Charlene tried to steady the tremor in her hand. She had envisioned a different future, a family united, love thriving, but life had taken a cruel turn. Outside the firm's office, paparazzi snapped photos, capturing Oliver's defeated expression. He muttered a short no comment before ducking into a waiting car. Charlene followed after some moments, her composure intact. She had just won a crucial victory, but her heart felt heavy. Still, she reminded herself that this step was necessary to secure her baby's future. The stolen inheritance would be reclaimed, Oliver would be forced to atone, and the public had seen the truth of his betrayal. As the legal dust began to settle, Charlene could see the road ahead, one that involved single motherhood, healing, and rebuilding her life free from deceit. Now only the final chapter remained, turning this painful saga into something meaningful, not just for her, but for the causes her father cared about. Charlene intended to ensure that out of the ashes of this scandal, a brighter, more hopeful legacy would shine. With the legal battles behind her, Charlene left the Beverly Hills mansion, unable to face its haunting memories. Instead, she found comfort in a smaller Ocean View penthouse. There, she poured her reclaimed inheritance into something meaningful, the George Wilkerson Sanctuary for Mothers. Housed in a restored downtown building, it offered safe shelter, medical care, and job training for expectant women in need. At the sanctuary's opening ceremony, Charlene stood before a modest crowd. Months of scandal and heartbreak had led her here, but she felt more empowered than ever. She publicly honored her late father's legacy, vowing that the foundation would extend hope to those most vulnerable. Oliver Cooper, left reeling by his downfall, sold off parts of Cooper Innovations to repay what he'd taken. He sent Charlene a letter admitting regret and asked to see their child someday. She didn't respond immediately. Trust would take time to rebuild, if ever. Eventually, Charlene welcomed a healthy baby girl, Georgina, named after her father. Holding her daughter in the hospital's soft morning light, Charlene was filled with renewed hope. She had survived betrayal and public scrutiny, emerging with a clear purpose to raise her child in a world guided by honesty, compassion, and her father's enduring spirit. And so ends the tumultuous tale of wealth, betrayal, and justice. Charlene's world was turned upside down when her husband, Oliver, funneled her inheritance into a luxury lifestyle with his mistress, Alexis. Yet, through heartbreak, legal warfare, and a media storm, Charlene found her resolve. She reclaimed not just her father's legacy, but her own power and dignity. Oliver and Alexis paid the ultimate price, public humiliation and shattered reputations, forced to face the consequences of their selfish desires. Charlene emerged stronger, dedicating her restored fortune to a cause that honored her father's memory. Even as a single mother, she found purpose in nurturing new life, her baby girl, Georgina, and helping vulnerable mothers in need. This story reminds us that while betrayal can strike like a thief in the night, resilience and truth can vanquish even the darkest lies. If you found this real-life drama gripping, please like, share, and subscribe to support more captivating stories on this channel. Share Charlene's journey, and let's inspire others to stand up for justice. Your support helps us continue creating compelling content.